I have always found reservoirs and dams/hydroelectric projects to be very interesting in my research, as I have found many in the process of tracking the Earth's grid lines. As a matter of fact, they are go-to places for me when they surface at a place I am looking into on a particular alignment. In this video, I'm going to share with you why I find them such a noteworthy topic for investigation into the ancient advanced civilization that has been removed from our collective awareness. My name is Michelle Gibson. I'm going to start my investigation into this topic with the northern part of the province of Quebec in Canada. Lake Manicouagan is described as an annular or ring lake covering an area of 750 square miles or 1,942 kilometers squared in central Quebec. René Levasseur Island in the center of the lake is classified as the world's second largest lake island. We are told that Lake Manicouagan is an impact crater formed by a meteor. The crater is described as a multiple ringed structure about 60 miles or 100 kilometers across, with the Manicouagan Reservoir at its 40-mile or 70-kilometer inner ring being its most prominent feature. We are also told the creation of the Daniel Johnson Dam, with its construction starting in 1959, created the Manicouagan Reservoir as it presently exists, and part of the Manicouagan, or Manic, series of hydroelectric projects undertaken by Hydro-Quebec, the provincial electrical utility. The reservoir, acting as a giant head pond for the Manicouagan River, feeds the Jean Lesage generating system, which opened in 1967, and the René Levesque generating station, which opened in 1976, and is an underground hydroelectric power plant with 6 power generating units. The Wimbo-Niama ring structure in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is similar in appearance to Lake Manicouagan, and is also described as a circular meteor impact crater, which the Unia River flows around, with many tributaries, like Lake Manicouagan. Another so-called impact crater on northern Quebec's Ungava Peninsula in Pinguet National Park is the Pinguet crater, another meteor impact forming a perfect circle in the landscape. Only this time, we find that Pinguet is one of the deepest lakes in North America, said to be 876 feet or 267 meters deep, and holds some of the purest fresh water in the world. Compare Pinguet with the Bacalar Cenote Azul on the Yucatan Peninsula, not far from Chetumal, Mexico, said to be 295 feet or 90 meters deep. My understanding about the planetary grid system is that it was intentionally created in accordance with sacred geometry, and that everything on it has meaning. When I realized that both of these deep circular wells are on peninsulas, on the same alignment I was tracking off of Algeria, I was guided to connect them with Algiers on the world map. While Algiers may not be the third point of what could be an equilateral triangle relationship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, there does appear to be an isosceles triangle relationship, one where two sides are of equal length between these 3 points. One of the largest hydroelectric systems in the world, the James Bay Project, is a series of hydroelectric power stations on the La Grande River in northwestern Quebec. The red dots on the map show where the James Bay Project's power generating stations are located. Not without controversy, particularly regarding First Nations land claims in the region, we are told that by 1986, the largest power stations and reservoirs were mostly completed, including the Robert Bourassa generating station, said to have been built between 1974 and 1981, named for the Premier of Quebec who gave the vital political impetus to the James Bay Project. Some interesting things to note about the Robert Bourassa generating station. It uses the reservoir and dam system of the Robert Bourassa Reservoir to generate electricity. It is Canada's largest hydroelectric power station and is the world's largest underground power station. And the spillway is near the north end of the main dam and part of dike D-4, which is a part of a section of dikes known as the Staircase of the Giants, and notable for the spillway flowing down a 4,900-foot or 1,500-meter rock-cut channel, with 10 steps ranging from 30 to 40 feet or 9.1 to 12.2 meters in height, and 417 to 656 feet or 127 to 200 meters in length. This is said to be a circa 1907 photograph of the Shawinigan Water and Power Company, which played a major role in the history of hydroelectricity in Canada. At the end of the 19th century, American engineers considered the Shawinigan Falls to be among the best hydroelectric sites in North America. One of its founders in 1898 was the American businessman John Edward Aldred, who was born in 1864, and a director of the United Railways and Electric Company, a president of Baltimore's Consolidated Gas, Electric Light, and Power, the Pennsylvania Water and Power Company, and a chairman of the Gillette Safety Razor Company. Another founder of the Shawinigan Water and Power Company was Andrew Frederick Galt, an Irish-born Canadian merchant, industrialist, and philanthropist, born in 1833 and known to history as the Cotton King of Canada. Andrew Galt was born in 1833 and emigrated with his family to Montreal in 1842. His father was said to have died of cholera 9 months later, and his mother returned to Ireland. He and his brothers stayed in Montreal, and starting in 1853, Andrew Galt entered into a partnership in wholesale textiles with a man named Stevenson, and ultimately went into partnership with his brother Robert, forming the Galt Brothers and Company, now the Hotel Galt. This building was said to have been the location of Galt Brothers and Company store and warehouse building, built, we are told, in 1871. Then, in the early 1870s, he went into business with his brother Matthew, investing in cotton textiles, and they invested in a cotton mill in Cornwall, Ontario, known as the Stormont Manufacturing Works. Galt also had investments in beetroot sugar manufacturing, silk manufacturing, woolen mill companies, the Citizens Gas Company in Montreal, manufacturing companies, and electric light and tramway companies. This was Galt's home, called Rokeby, on Sherbrooke Street in Montreal, circa 1885. I am bringing up these two founders of Shawinigan Water and Power Company to show you how wealth, power, and control of utilities and amenities was consolidated into the hands of a few individuals early on in the new historical narrative we were given, of which the official start I have come to believe was the 1851 exhibition of the Works of All Nations, held in the Crystal Palace in London. All of this was part of the process of restarting the existing infrastructure of the original ancient civilization in order to create the world in which we are living in today, where power and control were consolidated in the hands of a few, and upon whom, like in this example, we are required to pay for things like razor blades and cotton fabric for clothing, as well as electricity and water. The people with the money had their hands in all of the action. The Churchill Falls Generating Station is in the province of Labrador and is an underground hydroelectric power station. It is the 10th largest in the world and the second largest in Canada, after the Robert Bourassa Generating Station in Quebec. Rather than a single large dam, the plant's Smallwood Reservoir is contained by 88 dikes, totaling 40 miles or 64 kilometers in length. The Smallwood Reservoir has a catchment area that is larger than the Republic of Ireland, at 27,000 square miles or 72,000 kilometers squared, that drops over 1,000 feet or 305 meters to the location of the plant's 11 turbines. The plant's powerhouse was hewn from solid granite, 984 feet or 300 meters underground. We are told construction began in 1967 and was completed in 1974, costing almost $1 billion Canadian to build. We are also told that the region opened up for this kind of development because of the completion of the Quebec North Shore and Labrador Railway, said to have been built between 1951 and 1954, and owned by the Iron Ore Company of Canada, or IOC. In 1958, the IOC opened the Wabash ore body near Labrador City, and that one and other iron ore reserve locations were developed through the region. A good bridge between Canada and the United States on this subject is literally and figuratively Sault Ste. Marie, also referred to as the Soo. Sault Ste. Marie was one city until the border between the United States and Canada was established at the St. Mary's River in a treaty after the War of 1812, creating Sault Ste. Marie in Michigan and Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario, on both sides of the St. Mary's River. In Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, the Edison-Sioux Electric Company Canal, also known as the Edison-Sioux Power Canal, supplies the St. Mary's Falls hydropower plant. an 18 megawatt with capacity up to 30 megawatt hydroelectric generating plant. Made from sandstone masonry, it was said to have been built under the supervision of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, starting in 1898, with operations starting in 1902, and is one of the oldest continuously operating power plants in North America. Just want to point out the doors in the middle of the building above ground level seems to be an odd location for a full-size set of doors. The water velocity of the power canal varies at times, but can be up to 7 miles per hour or 11 kilometers per hour, with the entrance being controlled by 4 steel head gates. The first locks were said to have been built here in 1855 and operated by the state of Michigan until transferred to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 1881, who owns and maintains and operates the St. Mary's Falls Canal, within which the locks are located. There are 2 hydroelectric powerhouses next to the Soo locks, together generating 18.4 megawatts for the Soo locks complex. The Sault Ste. Marie International Bridge runs between the United States and Canada, which permits vehicular traffic to pass over the locks. It is the northern terminus of I-75, which goes all the way to Miami, Florida. The Sault Ste. Marie International Railroad Bridge runs adjacent to the International Bridge and was said to have been built in 1887. It has a vertical lift bridge and swing bridge feature as well. Really sophisticated engineering feats for the times. Next are the St. Mary's Falls, of which the international boundary goes through the middle. In the right foreground of this photo, in front of the international bridges, are what are known as the compensating works. They consist of 17 piers and concrete aprons bearing on sandstone bedrock. Piers 1 through 9 are in Canada, and piers 10 through 17 are in the United States. These were said to have been constructed between 1913 and 1919, with World War I occurring between 1914 and 1918, and has an extremely sophisticated sluice gate and gate machinery system. On the Ontario side of Sault Ste. Marie is the Great Lakes Power Canal. Great Lakes Power was established in the early 1900s by Francis H. Clergue. He was another one of those early businessmen in on all of the action. Francis H. Clergue was the leading industrialist of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario in the late 1800s and early 1900s. In addition to Great Lakes Power, he established the Sault Ste. Marie Pulp and Paper Company in 1895. The Algoma Steel Factory, said to have opened in 1902, at which time the factory was said to have produced its first rail tracks, and where it specialized in rails for Canadian railways as its primary product for the next 25 years, we are told. Clergue was also credited with the development of the Algoma Central Railway, connecting it to the transcontinental artery of Canada. He was said to have initially owned it and needed a way to transport logs from the Algoma district in northeastern Ontario for his pulp mill and iron ore for the steel factory, and that it was chartered on August 11th of 1899. It was said to have been completed to Hearst, Ontario in 1914. This is the Algoma Central and Hudson Bay Railway Terminal Station in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, said to have been built in 1912. Entering into the United States, I will start with several places on the West Coast. In Washington State, the Grand Coulee Dam was said to have been built between 1935 and 1942 during the administration of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Keep in mind, this would have been during the middle of the Great Depression and halfway through World War II. By its maximum capacity, it is the largest power station in the United States. It is a concrete gravity dam on the Columbia River and the centerpiece of the Columbia Basin Project, the irrigation network that the Grand Coulee Dam makes possible. The Columbia Basin Project is the largest water reclamation project in the United States, supplying water to over 670,000 acres, or 2,700 kilometers squared, of the 1.1 million acre, or 45 kilometers squared, large project area, all of which was originally intended to be supplied. We are told the proposal to build the dam was the focus of a bitter debate during the 1920s between two groups. One group wanted to irrigate the ancient Grand Coulee with a gravity canal, while the other pursued a high dam and pumping scheme. The dam supporters were said to have won, and in August of 1934, FDR endorsed the high dam design. The Grand Coulee is described as an ancient riverbed. A coulee in the northwestern United States is defined as a large, steep-walled, trench-like trough, which commonly are spillways and flood channels incised into the basalt plateau. This was said to be an 1853 lithograph of the ancient Grand Coulee. It stretches for about 60 miles, or 100 kilometers southwest from the Grand Coulee Dam to Soap Lake, being bisected by dry falls into the upper and lower Grand Coulee, and part of the channeled Scablands region of Washington State. Dry Falls, a scalloped precipice with 4 major alcoves on the opposite side of the Upper Grand Coulee from the Columbia River on the left, is described as one of the largest waterfalls ever known. Estimates are that the falls were 5 times the width of Niagara Falls, with 10 times the flow of all the current rivers in the world combined, and which brings to my mind in appearance the King George Falls in the Kimberley region in Australia on the right. One of the theories about the formation of the channeled scablands from the 1920s was that they were created by immense but short floods, for which the theorist J. Harlan Bretz had no explanation. I can't help but wonder what story we are not being told about this region. The Chief Joseph Dam is further west along the Columbia River at Bridgeport, Washington, from where the Grand Coulee Dam is located, and is a concrete gravity dam, with construction said to have begun in 1950 and completed in 1961. Operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the Bonneville Power Administration, it is the 3rd largest hydroelectric power producer in the United States. As a run-of-the-river dam, which is not able to store large amounts of water, water flowing to the Chief Joseph Dam from the Grand Coulee Dam must be passed on to the Wells Dam. The Wells Dam is a hydroelectric dam on the Columbia River, downstream from the confluence of the Okanagan, Methow, and Columbia rivers. It has been open and producing electricity since August of 1967. Lake Pateros is the reservoir for the Wells Dam. The aerial picture here is seen of Chelan, Washington, which is located on Lake Pateros. Of particular note is the shaped shoreline seen here. While the lake is not deep, a high volume of water moves through it. The John Day Dam spans the Columbia River where it forms the border between the states of Washington and Oregon. It was said to have been built between 1968 and 1971. It is a concrete run-of-the-river dam featuring a navigation lock and fish ladders on both sides. The John Day Navigational Lock has the highest lift at 110 feet or 34 meters of any lock in the United States. Lake Umatilla was said to have been created in 1971 with the construction of the John Day Dam and is its reservoir. The John Day Dam is located 28 miles or 45 kilometers east of the city of The Dalles in Oregon, where another dam is located. The Dalles Dam is also a concrete run-of-the-river dam spanning the Columbia River, said to have been built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers between 1952 and 1957. The city of the Dalles was said to be a major Native American trading center for at least 10,000 years, and that the general area is one of North America's most significant archaeological regions. The rising water filling the Dalles Dam submerged the Celilo Falls and the village of Celilo in 1957. The economic and cultural hub of Native Americans in the region, and said to be the oldest continuously inhabited settlement in North America. We are told that 40 petroglyph panels were removed with jackhammers before the land was inundated with water and placed in storage before being installed in the nearby Columbia Hills State Park in the 2000s. I have long suspected that the fate of Celilo was the fate of many ancient sites, and was among the first ahas of this particular journey for me when I was living in Oklahoma between 2012 and 2016. The very first place I went to in person to test my idea that man-made lakes covered up ancient infrastructure was Lake Thunderbird outside of Norman. I knew what to look for and was not surprised when I found it. What my research is leading me to conclude now is that the hydrological engineering technology was pre-existing too, and the construction was just restarted for present-day use in the creation of a water supply and the cover-up of ancient infrastructure. At any rate, Lewis and Clark of westward expedition fame were said to have camped for 3 nights near Celilo at the Rock Fort campsite, described as a natural fortification, in late October of 1805. As a matter of fact, the historic Granada Theater in downtown The Dalles is on the Lewis and Clark Trail and still in use as a theater today. It was said to have been built in the Moorish revival style between 1929 and its opening in 1930, and is famous for having been the first theater west of the Mississippi to show a talkie. Various fur trading companies were said to have been active in the region around present-day The Dalles, starting around 1810, and this continued on with growth of trading networks like that of the Hudson Bay Company, starting in the 1820s through the 1840s. This is the full Hudson Bay Company mural in The Dalles. We are told that in 1850, the United States Army founded a small post at the site of an old mission that was here, and that a post office was established within the city's current boundaries in 1851. The Dalles was incorporated as a city in 1857. A neighborhood in southeast Portland is named Mount Tabor, which is also the name given to an extinct volcanic vent and park located there. Portland is said to be one of 6 cities in the United States to have an extinct volcano within its boundaries. It was said to have been named after Mount Tabor in Israel, the biblical site of the Transfiguration of Jesus. We are told that the land making up the Mount Tabor volcanic butte was identified as an ideal site for reservoirs in the 1880s due to its ideal location as a water distribution system. The Mount Tabor reservoirs were said to have been built between 1894 and 1911. We are also told the reservoirs and their gatehouses were artistically constructed, incorporated using extensive reinforced concrete that was designed to look like stonework. 2 early techniques with patents by engineer Ernest Ransom. We are told that John Charles Olmsted, stepson and nephew of famed landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted, was in Portland in 1903 to help design the 1905 Lewis and Clark World Exposition, said to have been held to celebrate the centennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition, for which all of the buildings were said to have been designed for the exposition after its site was selected in September of 1902 at Willamette Heights, which was described as a grove of trees, of pasture, and waist-high stagnant water at the site's center. And during the time John Charles Olmsted was in Portland, he was asked to create a grand plan of parks in Portland, which would come to include, in time, Mount Tabor Park. Before I head over to the east coast of the United States to look at noteworthy reservoirs and dams there, I would be remiss if I did not stop at the Hoover Dam to take a look. Hoover Dam is a concrete arch-gravity dam said to have been constructed between 1931 and 1935 during the Great Depression, and which caused the deaths of over 100 workers. We are told many of the workers on the dam had been unemployed due to the Depression, as a great number of unemployed men and their families were said to have converged on southern Nevada, creating squatters' camps there during the time of its construction. It is located in the Black Canyon of the Colorado River, on the border between the states of Nevada and Arizona. The Hoover Dam's reservoir is Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States by volume when it is full. There are 2 details I would like to point out about the Hoover Dam. The first is that the timeline for Ames shovels includes helping to build the Hoover Dam. I am curious as to exactly where all those shovels came into play building the Hoover Dam, with all of that hard rock, water, and massive infrastructure seen here. What were they digging? The other thing I would like to point out is the star map at the Hoover Dam Memorial on the Nevada side of the complex. It was said to have been created by Oscar J.W. Hansen, a Norwegian-born naturalized American citizen. Inlaid into a terrazzo floor, which consists of chips of marble, quartz, granite, and glass, poured together with a binder, is a star chart said to preserve for future generations the date on which FDR dedicated the Hoover Dam on September 30th of 1935. In this celestial map, the bodies of the solar system are said to be placed so exactly that those versed in astronomy could calculate the precession of the pole star for approximately the next 14,000 years. There is even an inlay showing that Thuban was the pole star for the ancient Egyptians at the time of the Great Pyramids. I just find all of this about the star map being inlaid into the Hoover Dam complex to memorialize the building of it for future generations, to be able to tell when it was built in precessional time, which measures an approximately 26,000 year cycle of time, to be very, maybe the words I'm looking for are out of place. It just seems very strange to me to be coming from people in our relative day and age who aren't oriented to astronomy and measuring the cycles of time, which the ancients very much were into doing. This is the ancient Mayan observatory at Chichen Itza. The ancient ones faithfully tracked the stars over incredibly long cycles of time. Here are some notable places I have identified from my research on the East Coast. The first I would like to bring up is the Scituate Reservoir in Rhode Island. The Scituate watershed and reservoir system has 6 tributary reservoirs, which provide the drinking water for 60% of the state's population. This massive public works construction project was said to have gotten underway in about 1915 and completed by 1925. Interesting to see the low-tech looking equipment for the project pictured here in 1921, according to the date at the bottom right, that we are told was being used to build this, and this. On top of that, World War I was happening at the beginning of that time period. The next place I'm going to take a look at is the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir in Manhattan Central Park, a decommissioned reservoir that was said to have been built between 1852 and 1862, with the Civil War taking place between 1861 and 1865, to receive water from the Old Croton Aqueduct. The Old Croton Aqueduct, said to have been built between 1837 and 1842, originates in Croton in Westchester County and is 41 miles or 227 kilometers long. This is the high bridge of the Croton Aqueduct, which crosses over the Harlem River on its way to Central Park, which reminds me of the Ribblehead Viaduct in the Yorkshire Dales National Park in northern England, said to have been built for the railroad between 1869 and 1874. How could they have accomplished these kinds of engineering feats in a time period we are taught was low technology? Upper Roxborough Reservoir is an abandoned watershed project in northwest Philadelphia. These stately structures are described as filters of the reservoir. It brought to mind the fort the Portuguese were said to have built on Hormuz Island after they captured the island between today's United Arab Emirates and Iran in 1507, the interestingly named Fort of Our Lady of the Conception, for a military fort, and also compared with a pedestrian underground associated with the long-gone Crystal Palace in London. Jones Falls is described as an 18-mile or 29-kilometer major north-south stream that runs from the north through Baltimore City before it empties into the inner harbor. This is the Lake Roland Dam and Reservoir in Baltimore County, north of Baltimore City, and said to have been built between 1854 and 1861. The Jones Falls flow into and out from Lake Roland. Lake Roland is described as having been a defunct reservoir since 1915. They sure put an enormous amount of effort into building something that wasn't used for very long, like not even 60 years. I have one more place to share in the United States before I jump over to the reservoir and dam systems in Europe, where I will start in Great Britain. Someone left a comment about Ohio dams. So I looked in Ohio, and this is just a little of what I found. One example is the Hoover Dam in Westerville, Ohio, near Columbus. The construction dates we are given are between 1953 and 1955. And that it was named for two brothers, Charles P. Hoover and Clarence P. Hoover, to honor their careers with the City of Columbus Waterworks. Then I stumbled across the Ohio River Main Stem Navigation System, a system of locks and dams which begins at the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers at the Point in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and ends at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi River near Cairo, Illinois. The entire Ohio River Navigation System is operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What we are told was that in the early days of steamboat navigation on the Ohio River, the major physical hurdle that delayed travel were the falls of the Ohio near Louisville, Ohio, and that this made steamboat travel very challenging when the water was low. Thus it was determined that a canal and lock system was needed to circumvent the falls of the Ohio. The construction of the first one, the Louisville and Portland Canal, was said to have started in 1825 and completed in 1830. We are seriously told the privately financed canal was constructed by hand tools with the help of animal-drawn scrappers and carts. Next came the Davis Island Lock and Dam site in Avalon, Pennsylvania, said to have been designed by William Emery Merrill, an American soldier and military engineer who graduated first in his class at West Point in 1859, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Said to have been the first dam constructed on the Ohio River, it officially opened on October 7th of 1885 and was dismantled in 1922, when it was said to have been replaced by the Emsworth Locks less than a mile downstream from the original site. I am very curious about finding the presence of railroad tracks at these hydroelectric and reservoir sites I have been looking at, like at Davis Island on the top left, Wells Dam at Chelan, Washington on the top right, along the Umatilla Reservoir of the John Day Dam on the Washington-Oregon state line on the bottom left, and there is a track showing in this historic photo of the settlement of Celilo in Oregon before it was submerged by the rising waters of the Dalles Dam. I really believe they were built by the original advanced Moorish civilization that has been removed from our awareness, and that building the railroad and the other infrastructure here that I am researching actually involved digging them out from the mud flood, making them viable once again, and figuring out how to restart their use. Let's see what we find elsewhere. On to Great Britain. I'm going to start with the 3 Derwent River dams and reservoirs, located in the Peak District National Park in the north of England between Sheffield and Manchester, with the source of the River Derwent being Howden Moor, spelled M-O-O-R. As in the case of many places in different parts of the world, the memory of the people is retained in the name, and is a subtle way of hiding the truth in plain sight. The Howden Reservoir and Dam is the first of three that are consecutively located on the River Derwent, below which the water from the Howden Dam flows, immediately into the Derwent Reservoir. The Derwent Dam and Reservoir is the middle of the three reservoirs in the upper Derwent Valley in this part of England's northeast Derbyshire. This is another perspective of the size and masonry of the dam from its base. Both the Derwent and Howden dams and reservoirs were said to have been built between 1902 and 1914 and filled with water between 1914 and 1916. We are told the Bamford and Howden Railway was constructed between 1901 and 1903 from the village of Bamford to the south of the reservoir to Howden, to carry the many tons of stone required for the construction of the two dams. We are told these are the remains of the old railway at Derwent Reservoir, and that the Bull Hill Quarry in Grindleford supplied well over 1 million tons of stone needed for the construction of the two dams, and was closed in September of 1914, with the end of the railway following soon afterwards. Both the Howden and Derwent reservoirs were used by the pilots of the Royal Air Force 617 Squadron for practicing low-level flights needed for Operation Chastise, commonly known as the Dam Busters raids, during World War II. We are told they were used for flight practice due to their similarity to German dams. The narrow twists and turns of the upper Derwent were said to have been like those of the Ruhr River, a tributary of the Rhine, and that even the dams were very similar in their design and shape to those of the Möhne, Eder, and Sorp. So for one example of the German dams, this is the dam and reservoir today of Möhne, near Dortmund, Germany. Said to have been built between 1908 and 1913. It was breached by a bouncing bomb in a bombing raid on the night of May 16th and 17th in 1943, and repaired quickly, we are told, via the organization Todt, a civil and military engineering organization in Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1945 that administered the forced labor supply from concentration camps for construction projects, like the repair patch of the Möhne Dam, said to be pictured here. Is what we are seeing of the breach and subsequent repair of the Möhne Dam historically true? I certainly can't say for sure one way or the other, but the history of photo manipulation goes back to the beginning of photography in the historical narrative we've been given. I'm just saying that manipulated photos during World War II, in this example, is not outside the realm of possibility. At this point in my research, absolutely nothing would surprise me. In its role of rebuilding the Möhne Dam, Organization Todt was said to have utilized the labor of 7,000 men taken from the construction of the Atlantic Wall, one of the largest building works of the 20th century, fortifications built between 1942 and 1944, envisioned to make an Allied invasion of the Western European mainland from the sea impossible. Todt means dead in German. Back to England. Lady Bower is the lowest of the three consecutive dams and reservoirs in the upper Derwent Valley. It was said to have been built between 1935 and 1943 by the Derwent Water Board as a supplement to the other two reservoirs in supplying the needs of the East Midlands. Said to be made out of clay-cored earth embankment and not solid masonry like the other two I have mentioned in the upper Derwent Valley, notable features include two totally enclosed bellmouth overflows, locally named the plug holes, which are made of stone. The reservoir was said to have been formally opened on September 25th of 1945 by King George VI and his wife Queen Elizabeth. The Hodron Edge Stone Circle is located above the east arm of the Lady Bower Reservoir. For the next place in England to check out, I was drawn first to what appears to be an interconnected cluster of reservoirs and suggested water transfer locations, some of them from Wales to England. I wanted to see what the mechanism was for that. I'm starting with the Farmore Reservoir in Oxfordshire, primarily because of the moor sound in the name. It was said to have been built in two stages, with the first stage having been completed in 1967 and the second in 1976. It is near the city of Oxford on the left bank of the River Thames and is used for fishing, dinghy sailing, and windsurfing, as well as birdwatching and walking. This is called an old control building of the Farmore Reservoir, in the northern third of it, where fishing is not allowed. A wall divides the reservoir into the northern third and southern two-thirds. The Gorges Dam is located in the Elan Valley in Wales. Also called the Top Dam, it is a masonry dam said to have been built between 1897 and 1904, and is the uppermost of the Elan Valley reservoirs in Wales. These reservoirs were said to have been built by the Birmingham Corporation Water Department to provide clean water for Birmingham in England's West Midlands. Water from the reservoirs is carried by gravity to the Franklin Reservoir in Birmingham, construction of which was said to have been authorized by the Birmingham Corporation Water Act of 1892 and built in 1904 via the Elan Aqueduct, construction of which was said to have started in 1896 by the Birmingham Corporation Water Department and first opened in 1906. From what I am seeing, there have been proposals floated to transfer water from the Gorges Reservoir to the River Thames amidst concerns of potential water shortages. One of the places suggested as a water transfer point is Culham, which is adjacent to the Farmore Reservoir in Oxfordshire, and the location of a lock on the River Thames cut to the north of the main stream. It was said to have been built by the Thames River Commission in 1809. Something tells me there is a lot more to find in Culham, but I better not dig any more, or I will never leave and get seriously off topic. This is a map of dams with reservoirs on rivers in Europe. There are so many to choose from that to keep this as simple as possible, I'm going to look at the 3 countries on the map with the fewest number of dots: Poland, Sicily, and Corsica. The largest dam in Poland is the Coulee Dam in southeastern Poland, near the country's borders with Slovakia to the southeast and Ukraine to the southwest. We are told the first plans for a dam in the region came in 1921, but that plans were put on hold with the start of World War II. After the war, work on a smaller dam in the region began in 1953, and the Coulee Dam was said to have been constructed between 1960 and 1969, and its construction was said to have created the artificial lake which became the reservoir. I find the large, slightly rounded pyramidal shape next to the Coulee Dam to be noteworthy. In case you are wondering about that, an example of a type of pyramid with a modified, somewhat rounded shape from the typical description of a pyramid of 4 triangles which meet at the top is the Pyramid of Snefuru, also known as the Bent Pyramid, in the Algiza Desert, located approximately 25 miles or 40 kilometers south of Giza. Well, come to find out, the 4 or 5 points on Poland on the map of Europe I showed previously of places with reservoirs and dams is misleading, because this is the list of reservoirs and dams that comes up for Poland. So just a quick peek at another dam and reservoir in Poland. This is the Pilchowice Dam and Reservoir on Poland's Bober River. I could find surprisingly little information about the construction of the Pilchowice Dam in an internet search, but I did find these dates attributed to when it was said to have been constructed between 1904 and 1912. And its spillway on the top left looks similar to the spillway of the Robert Bourassa Dam in Quebec on the bottom right. I am finding the same situation in Sicily that I found in Poland with regards to the number of dots showing dams and reservoirs there. In this case, 1 dot, as I am finding more than that. Examples include the Diga Rosamarina, a dam across the San Leonardo River near Palermo, said to have been built in 1993. It is located in Caccamo, a town and commune located on the Tyrrhenian Sea coast of Sicily in the metropolitan city of Palermo. Apparently, a medieval stone bridge which linked Caccamo with Palermo was submerged by Lake Rosamarina. Here is a comparison photo between the Diga Rosamarina in Sicily on the left and the Hoover Dam in the United States on the right, said to have been built during the Great Depression between 1931 and 1935. This is the Diga Ansipa, also in Sicily. It is located near Mount Etna in the Messina province. This is all Wikipedia has to say about Lago del Ansipa, the lake that forms Diga Ansipa's reservoir. And the only reason I found the dam in the first place was because I found a reference to it in Wikimedia. Let's see what Corsica has to offer. an island in the Mediterranean Sea, and one of France's 18 regions. There are a lot more dams in Corsica as well than one dot would indicate. Here's a list of dams in South Corsica and the list of dams in North Corsica. The Tola Dam in the Prunelli Gorge was said to have been built between 1958 and 1960. It is a concrete, curved gravity, and hydroelectric dam. It impounds the Prunelli River. There is also the L'Ospedale Dam, which supplies drinking water to the very southern part of Corsica. Here is L'Ospedale Lake with its submerged tree stumps, all part of L'Ospedale Massif, where we find waterfalls at L'Ospedale pictured on the top left, compared to the Mandabkunda waterfalls on the right, one of the highest in Bangladesh, to these waterfalls on the island of Agatu, one of the westernmost islands of the Aleutians, on the bottom left, and these on the Hawaiian island of Molokai on the bottom right. There is also at least one balanced rock found at L'Ospedale Massif, examples of which are found all over the earth. One more dam in southern Corsica to share is the Barrage du Risenesi. This is the flag of Corsica, portraying a Moor's head. Why exactly a Moor's head? Same idea with the flag of Sardinia, a region of Italy located directly south of Corsica in the Mediterranean Sea, only it has not one, but 4 Moor's heads on it. What is this signifying to us if the Moors weren't an integral part of the history of these places? One more place I would like to take a look at before leaving Europe is the Crucius, which someone left me a comment about. The comment read, "It pumped out water for the Dutch dry making." I tell my Dutch fiancé that it is the Mud Flood Museum. That was enough for me to want to take a look into it. The Crucius, which is now a museum, was an old steam pumping station in the Netherlands, named after one of its promoters, Nicholas Samuel Crucius, said to have been born in 1678, who was a Dutch land surveyor, hydraulic engineer, cartographer, astronomer, and considered one of the founders of meteorology. He died in 1754. One of the things Nicholas Crucius was known for is this diagram attributed to him showing the distance of the planets to the Earth in 1732, also showing a complete lunar eclipse and a partial solar eclipse in that year, we are told. Almost 100 years after the death of Crucius, there were 3 steam-driven pump stations, one of which was named after him, built around the Haarlemmer Meer, described as a polder, or low-lying piece of land reclaimed from water, located near Amsterdam. This was said to be a map of the Haarlemmer Meer before reclamation. The lakes of the Haarlemmer Meer were said to have been formed into one by successive floods, in which villages disappeared in the process, and said to become a threat to Amsterdam. Long story short, King William I of the Netherlands appointed a commission of inquiry, and the commission's plan to build the 3 steam-driven pump stations around the Haarlemmer Meer were approved, with construction commencing in 1840. This is the first 20 years of the timeline we are given for the construction of the steam-driven pumping system of the Haarlemmer Meer, and the dates line up around the date of 1851, the year of the Crystal Palace exhibition, which I believe was the kickoff of a new historical timeline. The Crucius is described as the largest Watt-design reciprocal stroke steam engine ever built. We are told pumping began in 1848, and the lake was dry by July 1st of 1852. This is a topographical map of the reclaimed land of the Haarlemmer Meer in 2015. Next, on to dams and reservoirs on the continent of Africa. The Aswan High Dam is built across the Nile River in Egypt and is considered the world's largest embankment dam, built between 1960 and 1970. The building of it was seen as pivotal to Egypt's planned industrialization after the Egyptian Revolution of 1952, also known as the coup d'etat, at which time King Farouk of Egypt and Sudan was overthrown by the Free Officers Movement, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser and Mohammed Naguib. King Farouk was forced to abdicate in 1952 in favor of his infant son, Fuad II, and his son was deposed in 1953, at which time Mohammed Naguib became the first president of Egypt, who was only president for a year because he was forced from power by Gamal Abdel Nasser, who became the second president of Egypt in 1954. The British were credited in history with building the Aswan Low Dam across the Nile between 1898 and 1902. Then, after the 1952 Egyptian Revolution, we are told, the priority became storing the Nile waters in Egypt for political reasons. And after a lot of diplomatic backs and forths between interested nations, the construction of the Aswan Dam was said to have begun in 1960, and on July 21st of 1970 it was completed. In 1976, the reservoir was said to have reached capacity, and many archaeological sites were submerged, while others were relocated. One of the more interesting relocations from the Aswan Dam flood zone that I have encountered in my research is in Madrid in Spain. What is described as an ancient Egyptian temple, the Temple of Debode, was dismantled at Abu Simbel due to the construction of the Aswan Dam and donated to Spain as a gift for helping to save it. It was consequently said to have been rebuilt in the Parque del Oeste in Madrid, Spain between 1970 and 1972. I'm just wondering how a megalithic temple complex like this could have been transported. Those stones would be heavy. Arrows are pointing to what appears to be single block stones. I find it noteworthy that this said rebuilding of an Egyptian megalithic structure would have taken place at the tail end of Franco's rule in Spain, which ended in 1975. The Cahora Bassa Dam in Mozambique is one of the three major dams on the Zambezi River system. The Cahora Bassa Dam was said to have been built between 1969 and 1974, and is the largest hydroelectric power plant in southern Africa, and the most efficient power generating station in Mozambique. It is jointly owned by Mozambique and Portugal, and from 1975 to 2007, 82% of the dam and lake was owned by the Portuguese, and then in 2007, Portugal sold its share down to 15%. Mozambique was a Portuguese colony between 1498 and 1975. The other two major dams on the Zambezi River are the Kariba Dam, a double curvature concrete arch dam, in the Kariba Gorge of the Zambezi River basin between Zambia and Zimbabwe, said to have been built between 1955 and 1959, which supplies electricity to parts of Zimbabwe and the part of northern Zambia known as the Copper Belt. And the third major dam in the Zambezi River system is the Itezi Dam and Reservoir, said to have been built between 1974 and 1977. On the Kafue River in west-central Zambia at the Itezi Gap. In Asia, I'm just going to look at the Three Gorges Dam over the Yangtze River at Sanduping in China's Hubei province. Said to have been built between 1994 and 2003, it is considered to be the world's largest power station in terms of installed capacity since 2012. The total electric generating capacity of the dam is 22,500 megawatts. As I near the end of this video, I just want to close by taking a peek at some of the dams in Australia and New Zealand in the South Pacific. There are countless dams in Australia. Just in the Australian state of New South Wales alone, there are 2,250 dams, weirs, catchments, and barrages, and of those, 135 are considered major dams. So I'm going to show you a few of the dams and reservoirs in the Snowy Mountains. Like the Lake Yucumbene Dam, described as a major gated earthfill embankment dam with an overflow ski jump and bucket spillway with 2 vertical lift gates. Its construction was said to have started in May of 1956 and completed in May of 1958, 2 years to the month later. Its main purpose was for the generation of hydropower and one of the 16 major dams that comprised the Snowy Mountains scheme, constructed between 1949 and 1974, we are told, and run by Snowy Hydro. The largest reservoir and storage lake in the Snowy Mountains scheme is Lake Yucumbene. The Tuma Dam is to the west of Lake Yucumbene, and it is described as a major ungated concrete embankment dam, opened in 1961, with the main purpose of power generation across the Tuma River and also in the Snowy Mountains in New South Wales. This is the spillway of the Tuma Dam. The Tantangara Dam and Reservoir is directly to the north of Lake Yucumbene. It is a major ungated concrete gravity dam with a concrete chute spillway, and also part of the Snowy Mountains scheme. Much of the impounded headwaters of the Tantangara Reservoir are diverted to Lake Yucumbene. There's more to share here, but this is more than enough to give you an idea of what Australia's hydroelectric prowess looks like. One more stop, New Zealand. New Zealand is an island country in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, consisting of two main large islands, North Island and South Island, and around 600 smaller islands, covering an area of 103,483 square miles, or 268,021 kilometers squared. I'm going to be looking at dam systems around Auckland, on the North Island, New Zealand's largest city. But first, I'm going to look a little bit into the history of the Auckland region because of 1, the dates in question, and 2, the conditions that were described as being here in the historical narrative we are given both speak to the historical reset and the possibility of a mud flood. In the historical narrative we are given, Auckland was the first settled by Europeans in the form of the British in 1840, with the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840 between representatives of the British Crown and 500 Maori chieftains, we are told. Britain gained sovereignty over what became known as New Zealand. We are also told that between the years 1848 to 1863 there was a chronic water shortage, with Auckland's wells affected by severe pollution, to which the City Council responded by digging more wells. Then in 1865, we are told, water was piped in from springs and ponds on the Auckland Domain volcano, which is Auckland's oldest park in the central suburb of Grafton. In 1871, Auckland was promoted from borough to city, and Seacomb's well provided the new city with a steady supply of water from an aquifer below Mount Eden. Fast forward to 1946, when we are told the work commenced on the first of the Hunua reservoirs, Coulee Dam and Reservoir, said to have been completed in 1955. This is the bellmouth spillway of Coulee Dam, leading to a spillway tunnel discharging to a lined channel downstream of the dam. The Coulee Dam and Reservoir was said to have provided Auckland, for the first time in years, an adequate water supply. But Auckland was continuing to grow. It was decided to maximize the capacity of the Coulee Reservoir by expanding the water supply options. So in 1956, the Wairoa Tunnel from the Hunua to the Otau Valley was completed, and the Wairoa Dam was completed in 1975. The Mangatani Dam in the Hunua Ranges was said to have been commissioned in 1965 and is the largest of Auckland's upland catchments. It was said to have been constructed between 1972 and 1977. There's a lot more to see in New Zealand's Auckland region, but I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Do I think all of these dams, reservoirs, and hydrological projects were actually constructed when we are told they were? No. Do I think they could have been brought back into functional use when we are told they were? Yes. This is a photo I came across labeled City Councilors Visit the WWII Dam in 1907. Was the technology that could only provide tiny mule-drawn rail cars for the city councilors in 1907 capable of constructing the WWII Dam west of Auckland by 1910? As with the rest of the world's massive engineering projects, including canals, rail systems of all kinds, etc., I believe these major hydrological projects were an integrated part of the infrastructure of the original ancient advanced Moorish civilization, and were used in harmony and balance with the environment for the needs of the civilization.